Hi, my name's Dennis and this is 𝙳𝚎𝚗𝚒𝚘𝚗𝚒, videos about the various things I do to keep myself entertained since my cancer diagnosis. After setting this channel up, I wanted to start promoting it to people I meet in person. I thought the best way to do this would be with business cards with a QR code and a link to take you to the channel, but I wanted to find a way to make them unique. It occurred to me that one way to do this would be to have my Cricut Maker draw them in bright colours on black card. I know this is going to be quite slow, but it's an interesting challenge. Can I make readable QR codes drawn with a pen? The first step then is to work out how to do solid blocks of colour with the pen, which would normally just draw whatever line you've asked it to. The obvious way to do this is just to basically have lots of lines next to each other, or cross-hatching essentially. So what I did was to create a bunch of lines 0.4 of a millimetre apart so that they probably overlap slightly and end up with what looks like a solid block of colour. So if I zoom in here and create myself a guideline in CorelDRAW, let's set that to 0 on the x-axis and then have another one at 0.4 millimeters, like that. So that's very close together. So I need to zoom in a bit more so I can see it. And then I want to have them all the same height, so it doesn't really matter what that height is. I'll just set some boundaries for now. And then if I take my pen, I'll make sure that I am, it's in the view menu, snapping to guidelines. I can then find the intersection of those two guidelines down to that intersection, and then the next one. So I've got two lines now. Let's make those both 0.4 millimeters wide. So if we go into the properties for the lines and set the units to millimeters, I can set that to 0.4, and now they are essentially touching. So the next step is to duplicate them and again make sure that they're 0.4 millimeter away from each other. So with them both selected, I can then drag over to the next line and right click, and that then tells it to duplicate them. And then essentially I just repeat this process over and over. So again I can move the guidelines off to the next section, select all of the lines, duplicate them in again. I didn't get those quite lined up that time. That's better. Make sure they snap to the guidelines, and then essentially just repeat that process over and over. Accidentally created those extra guidelines which I don't need. Okay, so I think that's probably enough lines now. That is just over 50 millimeters wide. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to create the shape of a business card, and the dimensions of a business card I happen to know are 85 by 55 millimeters. So I can delete the guidelines I've created so far. Get rid of those. So then I want a new set of guidelines at 0. At 0 on the x-axis, 0 on the y-axis, and then 85 millimeters on the x and 55 on the y. And there's a business card. We want to have a rectangular outline of that. Snap to those guidelines, and just to make them a bit more fancy, and because I'm using the Cricut Maker, I can have it cut the cards out. I'll have a nice curve on the corners, so I can just edit the rectangle to add a curve like that. In actual fact, let's be a bit more precise about it and have that 5 millimeters. Oh no, that's a bit too much. 2.5 millimeters. Yeah, 2.5 millimeters round. So again, just clicking on there, I can set that by setting the intersection like so. So there's the shape of the business card. Now I want to get the 𝙳𝚎𝚗𝚒𝚘𝚗𝚜 logo, which I can bring in from another file. So open the 𝙳𝚎𝚗𝚗𝚜 logo like that, and I think it's page 2 I have as the consolidated version of that. Yeah, that's right. So I will take that and paste it into here. There we go. That will want to be much smaller, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Just move that somewhere onto the business card and resize it in a moment. The other thing I'll want is the QR code, and for that I'll use the Adobe QR code generator, which is available at this link. The reason I use this is because it actually gives you a direct link to the page you want to link to, whereas a lot of QR code generators will actually use a link shortener first, and then you're reliant on that link shortener continuing to work in order for the QR code to work. It also means that third parties can harvest the data from your use of that QR code. So then I just need to type in the link that I want the QR code to point to, which is going to be https://youtube.com/@𝙳𝚎𝚗𝚒𝚗𝚒𝚗𝚒𝚗𝚒𝚗𝚒𝚗𝚒𝚗𝚒𝚗𝚒𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑 drop that onto the desktop. So I've got my QR code. Back then to CorelDRAW, where I will bring the QR code in. There it is. Again, we can make it a bit smaller. And then I want to turn that into a vector graphic. The reason for that is that I want to cut it out of these lines that I've created. So to do that, what I'm going to need to do is go into the bitmaps menu and then do an outline trace. And it doesn't really matter which option you select as long as it's going to result in the sort of graphic that you're looking for. In this case, with a very straight-edged QR code, that's not really going to be very difficult. And so I'm not going to have it change the background. We'll keep the white there. And that looks absolutely fine. So I'm just going to hit OK. And that's generated as a vector version of the QR code, which is all of these different blocks. So I'll move that up there and you can see now the outline of all those different blocks. We're done with the bitmap. Delete that now. And what I want to do is separate the black from the white. So first of all, I'll just ungroup them. And then it's simply a matter of going down the list and selecting only the black ones in this case. I could have just chosen the white ones because once I've selected all of them, I can then move them out. Oops, I misclicked there. Move them away from each other, and then I've got the two separate images. Right, so with all of those selected, I'm going to combine them into one object, and then I can move that out of the way like that. And then to select the white ones, I can just drag over the area that I know the white ones are in, and I'll weld those together as well. Okay, so back to the business card. So I want to zoom in on that, and then I need to decide on a height for my logo and my QR code. So let's have a guideline to find the limits of where we're going to put things on the page, and I think I will make that 5mm in. 5mm from the top is going to be 50. 5 from the bottom, of course, is just 5. And 5 from the right edge will be 80. So then I can put my logo into that corner just like that. I wanted to add a URL to the card as well, so that anyone going to computer which doesn't have a camera, or they don't know how to use QR codes, so they can just type it in. So I wanted a nice, short and easy to remember domain. So I thought Dennis C as in MISC, Dennis essentially. So dennisc.uk points to my YouTube channel at the moment. There'll probably be a website there eventually, but for now it's just pointing directly to the channel. So I've got that text there, and I'm going to use Futura for that, I think in bold, nice and easy to read. Then I want to make sure that that's centered on the card. So let's make it aligned with the 5mm limit at the bottom. Select the area of the card, and then with the Align and Distribute tools, I can align to the object and then center it. And there we go, that's centered. I also want to have some text on the card explaining what the YouTube channel actually is. And so I've got a tagline that I can add like that. Cancer sufferer, trying to have as much fun as possible in whatever time I have and making videos about it. So I want to make that the right size, the right position, and I want it centered as well. So again, if I select that and align it centrally, there we go. And so now I can have the QR code and the logo out to about this point. That works out at 27, let's call it 28. 28 pixels up like that. And then I can resize the logo to that point. Make sure that it's aligned on this side as well. Lovely. And then I'll bring that QR code down. Now, because of the fact that I'm going to cut it out of these lines, I actually want the white version of the QR code. So I'm going to change that to a different color, make it pink so I can see it. And then bring that down. Zoom back in and scale it to the same size as the logo. And then make sure it's aligned with the grid like that. Great. So having done that, now we need to apply the lines. And this is where it gets slightly tricky. If I go and find my bunch of lines up here, I'll bring them down so I can see them. I'm zoomed into the business card. We can see we've got plenty of them, so there's no worry there. They're not the right height yet, so we can fix that. I'm going to weld them all together so that we don't have to worry about losing them individually. And I also want to make sure that I've got a little bit of overlap top and bottom, so that I'm going to end up with the right at the end. Now these have turned out not to be actually black. They're CMYK, aren't they? Right, okay, so let's change the colour of the pen to RGB and 0. So definitely properly black as they can be. And then if I look at my layers, I can find the logo, which is this one. Change the colour so I can see it. There we go. And now essentially what I'm going to do, I want to retain a copy of my lines. But then what I want to do is cut out this from this. Right, so with both of them selected, I can simply extract the back object from the front object, and there we go. Now the advantage of doing that is that we end up with a nice clean line all the way around. If I was to do it the other way around, what you'd see is that it pixelates it, because essentially we're chopping the line up into different sections, whereas by doing it, removing the back from the front, we're also creating an outline around the edge of the piece so that we get a smooth edge rather than the jagged edge that we saw before. So now I'm going to turn the outline color to black, and we have a problem, because if I now change the properties of that to be 0.4 millimeters wide, you can see that we lose a lot of the space inside the what should be the white part of the logo. So what we have to do before we do that cut is to take our outline in our original shape that we're cutting out by 0.2 of a millimeter. Again, remembering that we're working with a 0.4 millimeter line, but we're only going to half of it. Okay, so before we shave off that 0.2 millimeters, we want to retain the edge of the shape. So we need to add 0.2 millimeters all the way around the outside. So before we subtract that 0.2 millimeters all the way around, I want to make sure that the box is 0.2 millimeters bigger all the way around so that the overall size of the logo doesn't change. So to do that, I'm going to create a new box, which is 22.4 millimeters by 22.4. Remember, we've got to add 0.2 on each side. And then we can center that around the existing logo shape, like so, and then add those together. Now, in actual fact, the easiest way to do this is instead just to go back to my original logo, find on page 1 the actual shapes that make up the logo itself, and then place those exactly over the ones that we're working on. Without changing the aspect ratio, I'm just going to set the width to 22 millimeters. And that's disappeared off up there. And I can bring that down here and then make it perfectly aligned. So I'll just center that with the rectangle I just created. Also, I'll weld those together so we're dealing with one object before I can then center it like so. Then I want to cut the foreground out of the background and then change that to a solid color with no outline. And we now have a version of the logo. We can get rid of the orange one underneath. We have a version of the logo that has that 0.2 millimeter offset all the way around. Then we can apply the contour where we want to take 0.2 millimeters off everything. We want to break the contour apart and then delete the green one, which is the older version, and change this to a different color so we can see it. So now what you can see is that we have a version of the shape which is the correct size for the logo, but everything has been cut out by 0.2 of a millimeter to account for the extra part that we'll see when we add the lines. The positioning of this object needs to be exactly right. Right, so the positioning of this should be 30.6. There we go. And that's now exactly on the 5 millimeter line. Now we can select the set of lines and the logo and then use the remove the back object from the front object. And there we go. Now, as before, I need to change the back outline color to black. But now, when we change the properties of that line to be 0.4 millimeters, we end up with something that is much more representative of the logo shape. We want to trim off that extra 0.2 millimeters that's been added by doing this, so that we don't end up with these rather odd extraneous pieces. So in order to remove these extra lines, I just want to go back in by that. I want to go in by that 0.2 millimeters, and then subtract that from the shape, and that cleans that line up quite nicely. And I just need to do that on each side. So that one will need to go in by 0.2, so 5.2. And then snip that off from here. There we go. Likewise, we need to go up 0.2 here. So we just want to take that in by 0.2. And snip that off. And now we have a nice clean logo. Next, we want to repeat the process for the QR code. So again, we want to increase the edge of the QR code by 0.2. So these guidelines need to come out by 0.4 now. So 50.2, 80.2, 27, that has to go down, so 27.8, and then 0.2 in from that edge, which is 58, so that will be 57.8. And this one, because there are no white parts at the edges, it's much simpler. All we have to do is take each node and drag it out at the corners by that 0.2 to increase the overall shape to that size. And then I can take the 0.2 off everything using the contour tool again, and then break the contour apart. So object, break contour apart, delete the pink one because we no longer need that. Change the color of the black one so that we can see what we're doing against the black of the, make it pink again, the black of the lines, which we can then bring in underneath that shape. So now we can bring those lines in underneath the shape, like so, drop them below the pink, like so, and also make sure that they are aligned correctly on this right hand side. So the X coordinate needs to go down by 0.2, so change that. No, needs to go a little bit further apparently. Oh no, it doesn't. No, because of course our guidelines are still wrong, aren't they? We adjusted them. So if I make that back to 80, there we are. Right. So in actual fact, we do want to move that a little bit further to the left. Let's try another 0.2. So that'll be 0.394. And there we go, we're on the line. Lovely. So now all we need to do is select both the lines and the modified QR code and then take the back from the front. We've got our lines. Again, we can change the outline color, set the foreground color to clear, and then change the properties of the line so that it's 0.4 millimeters. And there we have our QR code looking correct again. Now we can zoom out. So now we want to repeat that for the 𝚬𝚎𝚗𝚒 text. So that ends up being solid. So we can change that to a color. Make sure that we can see it above the lines, and then we want to remove the back from the front, change the outline colour to black at 0.4, and so there we have it. We have our business card. So now all we need to do is bring it into Cricut Design Space and make it. So here I've brought the business cards into Cricut Design Space. The one change I have made is to the text in the middle. Rather than have it draw the outline of text that I used in CorelDRAW, I've used a suitable font from Cricut Maker called BFC basically, which is a writing font and will therefore only have one line. So it'll just be neater and easier to read. I've got 9 copies of the business cards, so I can have them fill an A4 sheet. So if I now hit the Make button, we'll see it lay those out in a grid. And so all I need to do now is load up a mat with the black card, and we can try this out. Now I don't want it to do all 9 cards in one go, so I'm going to hide the other 8, just do the first one, so we can test that it is actually going to work. And then I can use the rest of the card simply by printing it again and hiding that one the next time. So that's those hidden. So now I'm going to click continue. It will connect to the machine. I'm going to select medium cardstock because I'm using 200 GSM card. And then I need to load up my mat. So now I can take the cover sheet off the mat, load the card, roll it on with the brayer to make sure that it's stuck down nice and securely. Take my yellow Cricut pen. So these are the opaque gel pens that I'm using here. Unfortunately, I'd found that the white one didn't really work. It gets gummed up very easily and doesn't produce good results. So that's why I'm using the yellow one here. And then I can go over to the Cricut and get it working. Okay, so here's the finished business card. Let's see if my phone can read the QR code on it. And yes, it can. Tap that and it takes me straight to the YouTube channel. Perfect. So there we have it. You can make a working QR code with a pen. That's it for this video. Make sure you're subscribed and have pressed the bell so you get notified next time I put a video up. And until then, goodbye.